Welcome to the Herbworks podcast featuring Roger Drummer, the formulator at herbworks.com. An educator in the field of nutrition and Chinese herbalism, Roger has a unique ability to keep things simple by taking all the guesswork out of complicated health issues. Herbworks is committed to helping you improve your health and enhance your life through herbs and common sense.
Hi everyone, it's Laura Shakti
and Roger Drummer
with our Herbworks podcast. I'll tell you, I'm already getting hungry just thinking about salt, bread, and butter. It's what they serve you when you go to the Italian restaurant, right? You get to tear off that hunk of nice, fresh baked bread and dip it in the butter, the oil, put a little bit of salt on it. We're talking about this because I was at the hairdresser's the other day and we were talking about health in general, some other things. And I heard some really interesting comments. And the ladies had some questions that they wanted you to answer.
Well, great, because, we tend to get caught up in thinking we have to have these mind-blowing topics because we've been in the health field for so long that we forget that a lot of people are just getting into it and they want to know basic stuff.
Yeah, it's true. And so what could be more basic than salt, bread, and butter?
All right, well, let's get into it.
Let's talk about salt. So I'm in the hairdresser's chair and I've got foils all over my head. And there's another customer there. And we're talking about, I don't know how we got on this, but she says, well, she has this lovely Texan accent. I won't quite replicate it, but she says she was in the store and was looking at Himalayan salt. And she thought that must not be good for you, this pink Himalayan salt, because you need the iodine that is in regular salt. Well, and I said, well, I don't think that's true.
It's partially true.
Tell me what's partially true about it.
The government added iodine to regular table salt a long time ago. I don't know the exact date, but I would imagine it was back in the 20s or 30s. And the reason was that most people did not eat seafood or any other foods that contain iodine. And iodine is essential for your thyroid. And so adding it to the salt helped with basic goiter issues, which is a condition that your thyroid could get if it's lacking in iodine.
So it wasn't put in as a, how do you say, like a caking agent? Something that
no,
would help
they add other caking agents.
Oh, okay.
But it's added in for health reasons.
Oh,
and
that
it
was
did
the only
make
reason.
an impact on the health of the United States. But you have to remember, back when that happened, life was completely different. Today, more people are aware of seafood. We have better distributions of food.
Yes, we
More
do.
people are eating foods with iodine in it. And a lot of people are taking vitamins that have iodine in it. There's a lot of different sources to iodine, so it's not as crucial. But for a certain segment of the population, it still is because they're just not aware or that into their diet. They're eating too much processed food, might not have iodine in it. So it's a good thing.
Right. Now, different kinds of salts started being more popular in the gourmet world, a few years ago. But there's other people, such as ourselves, who've been shopping in health food markets for, 20, 30 years that have always known there were different kinds of salts. Can you talk a little bit for people that are unfamiliar about different types of salts and why you might want to use them instead of the regular iodine table salt?
Well, here is my opinion on that. And this is what I found out from just using them myself. And that is, you first get into it because it's, advertised in the stores as a healthier salt. And really the reasoning behind that is that it's not processed or minimally processed, so that type of salt has a wide range of trace elements in it.
Ah, okay.
A lot of different companies will say anywhere from 60 to 90 trace minerals that you don't get in regular salt.
And what is so important about trace minerals as opposed to iodine?
Well, trace minerals are one of the aspects about health one of the reasons that say you eat vegetables, because vegetables soak up trace minerals from the soil. Trace minerals provide your body with a wide range of electrolytes. They make up a bunch of minerals that you don't need in very large amounts, but they all are involved in the process of how your cells utilize energy and And they fall into this electrolyte category.
Okay, so can you give me an example of what those trace minerals might be, just so we have some words to think about there?
Well, magnesium.
Magnesium, yeah.
But that's a mineral that's a much larger, in bulk type of mineral. That's when you think of trace minerals, we're really talking about very small traces,
small
things
amounts
like boron
of minerals.
and issues like that. But magnesium you need in larger amounts, and it just so happens that most people are deficient in magnesium, so it's a good thing to supplement with. But the reality is, with all those salts, once you start using them, you realize that they just taste so much better than regular salt. And that's why you almost like you get hooked on it. So like I always use Himalayan salt, but I'm not someone who just uses that. I have normally 3 different salts in my kitchen, which is odd, but I buy this product called Real Salt, which I stumbled across in the health food store a decade ago. And Real Salt is from a mineral bed underneath the mountains of Utah somewhere.
Oh.
And
so it's mined.
It's mined, and it's just a very good tasting. In fact, it's underwritten by some board of chefs in the United States say it's the greatest salt in the world. And you try it and you go, wow, that is really great salt.
Now, we hope there's some chefs listening today so they can give us their opinions on which salts they love.
And it's different than using regular salt, because when you use it, you have to adjust for the flavor, because it's a flavor itself, and it doesn't have as salty a flavor. So you might think you undersalted your food because you don't have that real sharp salt in the background, but it's just different. And Himalayan salt's the same way. Himalayan salt probably got so popular just because it sounds exotic, but it's also the prettiest salt. It's just pink crystal. It's just beautiful to look at. And again, it has this flavor to it and profile, and it's less salty than regular salt.
And what about French salt? There's a couple different kinds?
Well, I only know of one, and this is kind of funny because I found that on a website when I was buying my Himalayan salt. And
you're getting advertisements for Dutch salt, French salt.
It was on sale, right?
Tibetan
and
salt.
then I read the story, and it's like hundreds of years they've been doing this process in this area of France where the high tides come in and the water washes across all these clay beds, and then it dries, and then they scrape the salt down by hand, and it takes on a gray color because of the clay underneath it. And I just thought it sounded fascinating, so I bought a bag of it. God, I loved it. It was fantastic salt, So, and that's the most popular salt in Europe. All the chefs in Europe use the French gray salt. And so, basically it comes down to taste. And literally, I'm one of those people that I don't worry about iodine because I get it in supplements. I eat seafood. I get it in other places. But, for the average person who's not aware of anything, they probably don't use any of these other salts anyway. They're just using their table salt.
Now, I grew up in Europe, and I remember as a child going down into the salt mines. We used to go to Salzburg and some of the other places, and, you can go down and see how they mined the salt and taste it and see it and smell it. And it was a fascinating experience. Yeah,
it's something just like another one of the topics we're going to cover a little later. You just don't realize growing up how complex a simple food is until you become someone like me who just loves food. And then you start looking into all these things, and it's kind of like red wine. It just
let's not go there today.
The whole thing just is unbelievable, the different levels and qualities of stuff. But really, it just comes down to taste.
So we've talked about the different kinds of salts and how there is a distinct and different taste from each one, right, as well as the fact that as you use them, you have to use them differently because of the way that your body identifies the taste of salt versus the taste of mineral. Right. How else can salt be used? Well, and for what reasons?
The only other thing that I normally use salt for, you can use it for salt scrubs. Like if you go to a spa, one of the things they always have is some sort of salt scrub where it's mixed with an oil or
we make our own
type of fat, and you rub it on your skin. It's really nice. But I remember back when I was studying healing, doing healing work and energy work and stuff, that we used to take salt baths all the time, and I still do that. Not on a regular basis, but I still do it, especially great for stress. It's where you take 4 or 5 pounds of salt. Now, if you're going to do this, by the way, if you're going to do this, you buy the cheapest salt you can buy. You go buy these 25-pound bags.
Go to Costco.
And you just want to buy the cheapest salt with no iodine added to it. You don't want anything added to it. You just want cheap salt. Now, that salt has a certain energy because it's out of the earth. And what they talk about in healing is that it has a greenish type energy, which is very cleansing. So then you take 4 or 5 pounds of that, you dump it into a tub of hot water, the type that you could easily sit in for 20 minutes. And to make it really nice, you dump a little bit of essential oils in it, like 10 drops of lavender into the salt, throw it in the water, then you dissolve it, jump in, and soak up to your chin. So your whole torso's under the water for 20 minutes. And then you drain the tub and you take a rinse with a shower, and you feel like you've lost 10, 15 pounds because it just cleans the dirty energy off your system, and you just feel lighter and you feel much better.
Yeah, this is the same way you feel after doing a salt scrub, but soaking in the water has a different energetic effect, I would say. But you can do the same thing when you don't have a lot of time by simply taking coconut oil or olive oil, whatever you like on your skin, and mixing salt and essential oils with it until it's a good paste, and then just scrubbing that all over the entire body while you're in the shower.
But that's just not as nice as
you
laying in
and
the
your
bathtub.
baths.
And, I just read an article, which means it must be true. I read an article where soaking in a bath for 30 minutes burns the same amount of calories as walking for 30 minutes.
No way.
Now, I don't know if I believe that, but if I didn't like to walk, I'd surely be trying it.
You'd be taking...
Now, really one other thing on the baths, though. If you're going to do the bath thing, don't stay in the water for more than 20 minutes, because it does have such a powerful cleansing effect to your energy that the water, if you could see it, it is pretty muddy with dirty energy. You want to get it out, rinse, take a rinsing shower, and believe me, you'll sleep like a log that night.
You don't mean that you physically see it with your eyes.
You don't physically see it, but it cleanses so much dirty energy off of you from other people and stress, emotional issues that that's attached to your energy field, that it's pretty dirty. So you want to rinse that off, and more than likely that night you'll be so relaxed you'll just sleep like a baby.
It does work very well. Now, you have a story about using salt for leg cramps.
Oh, yeah. Back when I discovered real salt, I was with a company and I was giving a lot of lectures. And one of my friends that I made in that company, Dennis, he used to hand out little vials the size of your pinky of real salt. And I asked him about it one day, and he goes, "Oh, it's the best thing for leg cramps you've ever seen." And I tried it. And what he does is, if he has it by his bed at night, and if he ever gets a leg cramp, he takes a pinch of this salt, puts it under his tongue, has a swallow of water, and it goes right away.
And so, did that work for you?
Yeah, it works. I've told dozens of people about that. I have another friend who does it all the time. Whenever he gets a cramp, he keeps it in that little vial. And if he wakes up with a cramp, he just throws that in his mouth.
And how is that better than the CalMag supplements that we have teenage daughters who are dancers, and they get severe leg cramps from growing pains sometimes, as well as being so active?
Well, it's different in that you have to go down in the kitchen and mix that one up.
In the middle of the night.
It's mostly magnesium. But this is just easy. If you get an occasional cramp and you have it sitting next to your bed, or you take it with you when you're traveling, that little vial, it's a real simple thing, and it actually works.
Great. All right, so let's talk about one of my favorite topics, bread and bread and butter.
All right. Well, let's cover bread first.
So, at the hairdressers, one of the women was saying that she went to the store grocery shopping, and she says, "Why does my bread have corn syrup in it? Why in the world I'm reading my labels like I'm supposed to do. I'm trying to get healthier. I'm trying to, buy healthy things. And here's corn syrup. Why do I want corn syrup in my bread?"
Because they stick it in everything that's cheap to make it taste better.
Because
if you see corn syrup in anything, it's because they wanted to cheapen the product. They wanted to make it as cheap as possible because it is the cheapest sweetener. And a little bit of sweetener in breads helps with the consistency of it. It helps with the structure of it. And so corn syrup is by far the cheapest thing you could ever buy. This is one of the reasons, they can't pinpoint one reason for all the obesity in the United States, but back when they discovered corn syrup and how cheap it was coincides with the exact time you started seeing Big Gulps and all these drinks in the 7-Elevens and all the convenience stores that were 69 ounces. They looked like a half-gallon bucket.
Right. You see people sucking out of a bucket, basically.
And for 69 cents, you get a 69-ounce Coke or something. It was like, why? Because they had replaced the sugar with corn syrup, and it was literally cost them 2 cents to make that whole drink. And so corn syrup now is added to everything because it's just pennies to buy the stuff.
And it may have an association with diabetes, is what you're saying, or obesity.
It's a type of sugar that disrupts your liver function. It raises your blood sugar too quickly. It's just not good for you. But so in general, bread that has that in it means that it's cheap bread.
So what do people who eat bread, wheat bread or other kinds of bread who have not gone gluten-free? We've done a podcast on gluten-free before. Right. But if you're still eating wheat and other gluten products, what should you look for at the grocery store as a healthy alternative?
I would look for a bread that probably doesn't have more than 4 or 5 ingredients, because once you get one of those breads that you look at the label and there's 25 things on it, that means that it's mostly chemicals. And bread probably only needs 4 or 5 ingredients, and most of those should be grains. So I would imagine that the healthier bread is the ones that's made out of healthier whole grains. And you can even buy bread that's fermented, like the sourdough breads. There's at the store I shop at in town, which is called Sprouts. I shop at Sprouts and I shop at Whole Foods. I shop at every health food store in town, so I go to all of them. But anyway, Sprouts has a line of just fermented breads, meaning they're all made like a sourdough. So that type of bread, which my kids absolutely love, has been broken down. The gluten's broken down somewhat, and it's a different food product than other breads. And so you can find that now. You can find sprouted bread, which again, that changes the grain a little bit, so it might make it easier to digest, and it has at least some of the health benefits of whole grains. So those are all breads that are available. And again, we live in the United States. Just about anything's available that you could ever want to find in this country.
If you want to pay for it.
If you want to pay for it, it's all there. And so bread, if you're still eating it and you're not into gluten-free, there's, an amazing amount of choices for different breads. And again, it's all about the type of grains that you like to eat. And it's also about limiting the amount of ingredients, because so many of the ingredients in cheap bread are terrible for your health, and they cause other problems. Just like not having iodine causes a problem, eating cheap bread has things in it that mess up your thyroid. And people don't realize that. Look at this is a great example of how things get out of control. And, in this country, thyroid issues are just huge. I mean, the amount of health problems related to thyroid issues is just staggering, right? So you look at the fact that we now fluoridate almost all the water in every major city, right? Well, fluoride messes with your thyroid. Back up until the 1970s, I think it was, in Europe, they actually gave you fluoride as a medicine to calm overactive thyroid. And they gave it to you in the amount that almost everybody in our country here drinks every single day out of the faucet if they're drinking tap water. Right?
Wow, so it's having a detrimental effect.
So it's negative, it has a detrimental effect on your thyroid, besides being really terrible for your brain and a lot of other things. But we'll talk about thyroid now. So now, back in the 60s, they changed bread. Now, almost all cheap bread, if you look at the label, has something in it called bromate. Bromate looks identical to iodine to your thyroid, and it takes up the receptor site, so your thyroid doesn't get iodine.
Interesting.
So, all these things kind of coincide to the fact that we have an epidemic of thyroid issues in this country. And it could just be because you're buying cheap bread and you're drinking tap water.
Right. So again, it goes back to, if you're looking at labels as my friends and the hairdressers were, not just looking at what's in it, but having this greater understanding that you're looking for food as simple as possible for the best taste and the best health benefit. So for instance, Tuscan bread, our eldest daughter makes an amazing loaf of Tuscan bread. It is 4 ingredients. Right. You've got your wheat and your oil and your salt and yeast, and you mix it up and it makes an amazing bread, even if you do it by hand. But you can find these kind of breads in the store. Sometimes they're called artisan breads, but sometimes you can find healthy multi-grain breads like at Costco or Trader Joe's or Smith's. There are some other...
Oh, everybody has them, but you just have to know what you're looking for because it's confusing. Everybody knows now that you're looking for healthier breads, so they disguise their crap as healthy bread. So people... With
corn syrup.
You want to look at limited amount of ingredients, find one that you do a little research on and just use that brand. And, I only buy a couple different brands. I buy the sprouted one for my kids. My kids bake bread, and then I buy a different loaf that I know the ingredients are really good. I myself eat gluten-free bread, but I don't eat very much of it because I only really have to have a piece of toast once in a while with my eggs. So,
and you poor thing, your wife doesn't bake you gluten-free bread, not yet.
But I use, just so in case you're listening and you want to find a good one, there's a brand called Canyon Bakehouse that makes a 7-grain bread that when you toast it, it tastes like regular bread and toast. So, that one's edible. There's a lot of them that are just like cardboard and...
And you grew up with fresh baked bread all the time.
All the time. This is the thing about bread. In America, there's just a couple of things that you don't want to tell somebody they can't have. One's guns and the other one's bread. And you don't want to tell somebody with a gun they can't have bread. Because, that's just 2 things. I swear to God, nobody brings it up. There's probably a Third Amendment on bread. But
there might be, because in the country, now you grew up in the countryside in the Midwest. You grew up in a small village. And your mother was the eldest of 12?
12.
And she took over the family baking for 12 kids plus the adults and whoever else had to be hanging around. She took over the daily baking when she was, 9 years old?
When I was growing up, to have a day without fresh baked bread was so unusual. I don't even remember if it happened.
Yeah, there was always bread baking. Your mother baked until she died.
Yeah, we go to a family get-together, and there's always 2 or 3 people that were famous for their baked bread, and we would just eat rolls out. It's just crazy.
And you have uncles that are famous for their pies.
I have this association with bread, and my kids all learned how to bake bread. Every one of my daughters knows how to bake bread, and so... I can see where it's hard to give up. It's one of the great comfort foods. There's nothing tastes like a piece of bread and butter, right? But, because of health issues, I have been able to train myself now to not really care. And I don't really care about bread. I've had my lifetime of eating bread.
But for those of us that do still bake or still enjoy that freshly baked bread, if it's wheat bread or gluten-free bread, there are options.
Yeah, there are options. And this is what I like to tell people. If you're going to eat bread, make sure you take the time to find a healthy bread, something that actually does have some benefits for you. Because if you notice how much of your diet is wrapped around bread, you realize that 25% of your calories might be coming every day from bread. So make sure that it's not just some fluffy white dough with 18 different added chemicals and corn syrup in it, because then your body's going to be, 25% of your nutrition is coming from a terrible source. So that's what I want to tell people with bread.
All right. Well, we've covered the ladies' questions about salt and the hairdresser questions about bread. Now let's talk about a subject close and dear to your heart, butter.
Yeah, because you know what? This is the only reason anybody ever invented bread. Because they needed to do something with the butter they had. They needed something that would actually hold it in any form it was in so they could get it to their mouth.
According to your world, Mr. Drummer.
Yeah, in my world. But anyway, butter is something I love. I eat butter every day. But I make sure that it's an actual grass-fed butter, meaning that the cows only eat grass, they don't eat grains. and that creates a butter that is just heavenly.
So it has to do with what the cows eat.
It has to do with what the cows eat. Same way with cheese, same way with milk, all different things. I don't use milk, and I don't eat a lot of cheese, but I do like grass-fed.
So what makes your coffee fantastic then? If you don't use
butter.
Just butter.
The butter. I put butter. I drink coffee. Not a lot of it, but when I do drink it, I put some butter in it and some MCT oil. And I started that when I had cancer as a way to extend my fast. It had to do with the ketogenic diet, and you can listen to my tapes on ketogenic diet if you want to find out that whole program. But it helped me stay in a fasted state, raise my ketones, and which cut off the sugar to my cancer. So that's how I got started with it. And I loved butter anyway, and it gave me an excuse to eat more butter.
Especially since you were eating bread.
But I only use one butter, and that's called Kerrygold. You probably heard of it. It's from Ireland, and it's only from grass-fed cows.
Is there an American counterpart that
there's companies now. There's companies now that have gone to making grass-fed butter, and I've tried 4 or 5 of them, and none of them stack up. I mean,
really?
I like to try butter, so if I see a new one in the store, I'll buy one. They just don't cut it. I don't know what it is, but there's something about that butter. Once you try it, it's just
maybe we'll have to look for some more American brands and see if there's
even
anything.
The organic butters that you see in the stores they're just not up to the quality of it. There's something about the flavor of it, and it has an oil in it called conjugated linoleic acid, which is a type of fat that your body uses. In fact, there's a lot of studies that show that it'll help you burn fat by having more of that fatty acid. It's good for your digestion. The grass-fed butters have more vitamin A in it, more beta-carotene, all these different things, because the animals only eat, green live grass.
Weren't you telling me that there was just some ban or tariff or something against Kerrygold in one of the American states?
Yeah, I read an article where Wisconsin was banning Kerrygold butter.
Wisconsin?
Yeah, because Wisconsin is a dairy state, and they produce a lot of butter, and Kerrygold's popular now, and so they've banned it. I guess there's some board there that has to okay whether butter can be sold in Wisconsin. And they declared that it wasn't up to their standards. Which was their way around having Kerrygold in the state, so the farmers wanted to promote their own butter.
Well, Wisconsin farmers, make us some fabulous organic grass-fed butter, because we do like supporting American products.
Well, if I lived in Wisconsin, they banned it, I'd be driving across the border and looking for... You catch me at midnight with a truck full of butter, standing there standing it out to people in the back alleys. You'll laugh, but when I was in Ohio, when I used to live in Ohio, raw milk was illegal, and we used to meet behind a store when the sun had gone down in the dark, and the guy would open his trunk and hand out gallons of milk, and we'd pay cash for it.
No, because you owned part of the cow, so that's how it was legal.
The only way I could do that was by signing a paper saying I owned part of a cow, but still they had to hide behind the store at night to hand out the milk, right?
All right, so listen, View, if you are new to eating healthy and you've tuned in for some basic information on salt, bread, and butter, you do not need to own your own cow in Ohio or Wisconsin or anywhere else. There are options for you.
There are options, and butter's a great thing. I wouldn't cook with it. Butter is meant to maybe be melted over things.
You cook with ghee. Now explain what ghee is to our listeners.
I cook with ghee only in certain instances. That it mixes well with certain soups and curries. Ghee is clarified butter.
What does that mean? Explain.
Clarified means that they've heated it slightly till some of the solids separate from it, and then they clear it off, and you're left with a clear golden liquid. Now in India, that's considered one of the purest health foods you could ever eat. They say it's good for fertility. It's good for all these different things.
It's like a nectar almost.
And so you use it in certain cooking and certain dishes. It really is a wonderful taste. But the ghee is separate. I have that in a separate jar, and I don't use a lot of it, but I love it in certain dishes.
We used to make our own, but now that we can get it at stores
Such a
cheaper,
reasonable price.
At a reasonable price, we don't make our own anymore.
Don't make our own anymore.
But if you've never tried it and you find ghee, who sells it?
You can get it at Whole Foods or you can get it at Sprouts.
What about regular grocery stores like Albertsons, Smith's,
You might be
Kroger?
able to. I've just never looked for it there. Usually when I want a specialty product, I'll go into Whole Foods or Sprouts because they carry specialty items. You know, Whole Foods is even more of a specialty store than it is a health food store.
Right. But for those of us that live in rural areas, such as we used to, how do you make ghee? Go ahead and explain it for a minute, because it's an interesting
ghee is
process.
you just put your butter in a pan. And
butter. You start with good butter.
You start with good organic butter, and you put it in a pan on the lowest heat possible, and then you have the patience to wait for it all to melt, and then it'll start to bubble a little bit. And when it's just bubbling a little bit, that's when the solids start to separate from it. So you let it sit there till it looks like everything is settled out of it, and then you strain it through a cheesecloth and put it in a jar and put it in the fridge.
Does it have to be in the fridge once it's opened?
It doesn't, but because it's hard to make it exactly when you're at home, it still has a little bit of the solids in it. It's not as pure as the bought stuff. Then it might go bad after a few weeks. But if you keep it in the fridge, there's never a problem with it. So butter's a good thing.
And why don't you cook with butter?
Because I don't want to damage the oils in it. Certain oils don't do well with heat. This is why you don't cook with olive oil so much, because olive oil has antioxidants in it, and it doesn't do well with medium to high heat. So olive oil, because it's so healthy for you, it's better for you to just pour it on a salad or pour it onto something else you're going to eat.
We dip things
dip
in it.
bread in it. You can pour it on rice. You can pour it on vegetables.
Yeah.
A lot of times when I eat toast, I actually use olive oil on it instead of butter.
And then you take a little bit of fresh herbs too and put it on.
And
It's very tasty.
So butter's kind of the same way. You don't want to disrupt or damage the oils in it. And so it's better just to maybe slightly melt it or do something like that with it. There's nothing more important to start paying attention to than the quality of your food. Because really what we talked about today was salt, bread, and butter, but we talked about the quality and differences of food. And to me, I'm a foodie. I think there's nothing more fascinating than food. But if you're going to eat, and this is the one thing everybody does, at least 2 to 3 times a day, put high quality food in your body. It's the best thing you could ever do for your health. Look at the food you eat before you look at buying supplements and all these other things, because it's not only the nutritional quality of it, it's the enjoyment of it, it's the health benefits to your body. It's just all these things change, and your body will change if you just start paying attention to the quality of your food. And believe me, it's so fascinating when you get involved with it. It's just fun.
Yeah, and I have to say, knowing your history, you grew up in rural America with family that made food from fresh and healthy or ingredients.
Gravy 100 ways.
And potatoes as well. But, that being said, people will think, oh, the typical Midwestern diet, it's not healthy for you. But when you start with fresh ingredients and you prepare them without preservatives and nonsense, it's still good food.
Yeah, a lot of these local foods things doesn't take much to transform the same dish into something much, much healthier just by tweaking it a little bit. You don't have to get rid of all your traditional foods. But life changes, and my diet has changed so many different times. I'm willing to experiment with everything, and along the way I've just learned an incredible amount of information about food, and I just love it. It's a hobby of mine.
And I think it's important to recognize also that society has changed so much in that, as I was saying, when you grew up, people cooked. They were at home, they cooked, your father cooked, your siblings cooked, you cooked. Our children know how to cook, but very few people do. And so that leaves people with having to be dependent upon store-bought foods, which can be not good for you.
And store-bought foods, most of the packaged processed stuff has, just like the bread we talked about, has an incredible amount of man-made chemicals in it that are just not good for you. They're meant to make a food last for a couple of years if it has to sit on the shelf in a box.
Yeah.
Kind of like that couple that just bought the granola.
Wow, you and your crazy news.
In Walmart, there's a couple that bought a jar of granola, and they were sitting at home saying, "This doesn't taste right." And they looked at the label, and it was packaged. It was out of date in 1997.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, right.
Oh.
Imagine that, 1997. Now that's what you call not rotating the stock.
All right. On that note, lovely listeners, eat well, have fun, take notice and good care of having wonderful salt, bread, and butter in your life.
All right. This is Roger Drummer.
And this is Laura Shakti.
Thanks for tuning in to the HerbWorks podcast. And if you want more information, go to herbworks.com.